Awesome, thank you. My name is Amanda. I'm an engineering manager, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to customize your management approach towards different kinds of people, or meeting people where they are. So as a general roadmap, today I'm going to walk through 3 different examples from throughout my career of times where the preferences of people that I worked with surprised me in some way. And I'll share how it came up, how I dealt with it, and then some of the things that I learned about on the way. And all of these have been anonymized so that I'm not, being creepy to my former coworkers. So to start out, I'll share Mia's story. So when I first started working with Mia, our initial conversations felt awkward somehow. So I would ask questions, Mia would respond, we would have some kind of back and forth, and we'd fill our one-on-one time. But somehow it felt like there was some kind of barrier between us and things weren't flowing naturally in some way. And at that point in my career, I relied heavily on structure. So I really liked structured agendas for one-on-ones, and I initially dealt with this problem by adding more structure. So I would add more topics to our one-on-one agendas. I'd come up with new questions to ask Mia, and I'd really try to dig information out of her. And again, we'd fill our one-on-one time. I would ask questions and Mia would answer, but it felt like conversation wasn't really flowing naturally. She wasn't really opening up somehow. And then in my initial review at that company, I got feedback from Mia that she felt like she didn't really know me. So that was validating in a way because it showed me that this wasn't all in my head. Mia also felt like something about our one-on-one relationship could be better. And again, normally in my career, I'd respond to this kind of situation by adding more structure and thinking of new questions for one-on-ones. But that hadn't really worked for me so far. So instead, I remembered that Mia had said in particular that she felt like she didn't really know me. So I tried to kind of lead by opening up more, sharing more of myself in small things like what I did the previous weekend or what annoyed me that morning, but also in bigger things like my concerns about the company's future and my hopes for the team. And with time, Mia also started to share more of her concerns and her hopes and her little annoyances as well. So this might seem a little counterintuitive at first, that in order to get someone to talk more, you have to talk more yourself. But this strategy really played out in this situation. So the general framework I'd suggest here is to customize your one-on-ones with each individual. In Mia's case, she really needed more space to think. So eventually we started to have looser, more open-ended one-on-ones with more pauses in between. So at times I would even count to like 15 or 20 in my head in between questions to give Mia some more time to process. And I think really in one-on-ones, it can be kind of tempting or easy to get into this rhythm of responding right away when someone asks you a question. But if you take the time to kind of pause and think about things, you can get much deeper into topics. So I think my high-level advice here is that people want different levels of structure in their one-on-ones. I still think structured agendas work well, particularly for people who are early in their careers. But some people really need a more open-ended environment to think. And a lot of people are kind of somewhere along that spectrum between highly structured and very open-ended. So I recommend starting with personal conversation. This is kind of social skills 101, but it can be difficult to remember in a professional environment when you have deadlines and a lot of topics to get through. But I think it's important to prioritize getting to know people on a personal level. Pauses can be a really effective tool, particularly if you're going into difficult topics, to give each other some space to think. And finally, most people take some time to open up, so you can expect the quality of your one-on-ones to generally improve and get deeper with time. Next, I'm going to talk about Nico. Nico was an internal transfer, and Nico's previous manager talked a lot about their focus on reaching the next career level. So in my initial one-on-ones with Nico, I focused a lot on our career ladder and what it would take for them to get a promotion to the next level. But I felt like they weren't really engaged in those conversations. Goal setting wasn't really taking off in the way that I hoped it would. And I started to get worried that Nico was even thinking about leaving the company. So I wasn't sure how to approach this situation, but I just kind of had a direct conversation with Nico. And I said, hey, your previous manager told me that you're really looking to get promoted, but I feel like the way that I'm approaching goal setting isn't really working for us. And they were honest with me that they had been very focused on reaching the next career level, but things had changed for them since then. And now they were more focused on just achieving a sense of stability in their career. So it was helpful for me to think about these different paces of career progression. So rock stars versus pop stars. Try not to read too much into the musical implications there. But for rock stars, development will be kind of rock steady, very linear, and they're often content to wait for natural opportunities to come up. For pop stars, on the other hand, they're often really hungry for new opportunities. Development might be a little bit jumpier. And people generally fall into this state if they're looking to be promoted. So importantly, these aren't static states, but people will kind of move in and out of these conditions depending on where they are in their career, their goals, whether they just got promoted, stages of life, etc. So my general strategy here is to remain open-minded about changes in motivation. In Nico's case, their focus had shifted because of some life changes behind the scenes, and now it was more important that they cultivate balance and stability in their career. So they still wanted to, get feedback and learn and grow in those ways, but they weren't as focused on growing their impact and reaching the next role level. So my general advice is that ambition will fluctuate throughout the course of a career. Many of us have experienced this firsthand. It's useful to check in with people to see how things have changed. And if they're not as focused on one source of motivation, try other sources of motivation, like maybe their impact on customers. And keep an eye on big life changes, but try not to make assumptions. So it can be easy to think like, oh, this person just had a baby, so they probably don't want to be promoted, or this person's early in their career, so they probably want to progress really quickly. But life is a lot more nuanced and complex than that. So try not to make assumptions and just kind of check in with people to see where they are. And finally, I worked with someone named Vanya. Vanya really hated being called out publicly in meetings or public channels. They didn't like this kind of recognition. And they didn't really seem to respond to individual shout-outs from their peers in retro meetings or things like this. But they also shared with me that they felt underappreciated and under-recognized. So normally in this situation, I might respond by shouting them out, making sure that leadership had eyes on their work, but these tools hadn't really been effective so far. So I sat down with their previous manager, who still worked at the company, and they shared that they were in the habit of going over their impact on customer success in one-on-one meetings. So they would sit down with Vanya and basically say, here's how what you did had an impact on the team, here's how you're impacting customers, kind of in depth. And this was illuminating for me because it made sense that Vanya was now feeling underappreciated on my team because I hadn't been doing this. So my general strategy here is to experiment with different methods of appreciation. There's a lot of different dimensions here. There's material recognition, like bonuses and compensation changes. You can give people social forms of praise in public, or you can encourage their team members to reach out and congratulate them on wins. But some people respond more to mission-based impact. So it can be helpful to share feedback directly from customers, or even say, oh, this change that you shipped improved performance by 10%. That can be really motivating as well. And then some people respond more to opportunity-based recognition, so getting some additional responsibility or recognition in that way. And in Vanya's case, they shied away from public recognition, but when I was to sit down with them and say, like, here's the impact that this change had, they responded really well to this form of appreciation. So in general, I think most people have a really deep-seated desire for appreciation. So if I met with someone and I asked how they like to be appreciated and they said it wasn't a big priority, I used to kind of take that at face value. But now I think this is really kind of a core human need, and it's useful to experiment and see if there are ways that you can help your team feel more valued. When possible, give options. So at my company, when someone has a work anniversary, I offer either a coffee gift card or a board of some congratulations from your peers, or both. And kind of unsurprisingly, most people do want the gift card, but some people want the praise from their peers and some people do not. So it's helpful to give options when possible. But sometimes people might not know their own preferences. So also kind of observe to see if someone's feeling underappreciated. And in those cases, someone might not have experienced something that worked really well for them or didn't work well for them. And it's worth experimenting to find what can help them feel a bit more valued. So if you take anything away from my talk today, management is not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone is different, and notably, most people are not you. It can be very easy to over-index on your own experiences or preferences as a manager or leader. And sometimes those are a really helpful guiding path, but sometimes you need to remember that other people have different preferences. Things change, so something that worked well for one person one year might not work as well for them the next year. And finally, people don't always know their own preferences. So if someone has a strong preference, that's extremely helpful to me as a manager. But if they don't, that might just mean that they haven't experienced something that works really well or something that went particularly badly either. And in those cases, it's helpful to experiment with them to see if there's a way that they can feel more appreciated at work or a different kind of career progression. Thank you. That's all. I'll be outside if you want to talk more.